Welcome to The Disappearing Mind, a unique podcast helping you find clarity and support along your dementia journey. Now, join National Dementia Trainer and Coach Dawn Platt for an all-new episode.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Dawn Platt, your host. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Disappearing Mind. Today in the podcast, we are going to be talking about the 4 stages of the dementia journey. But before we do that, I want to thank you for joining us. Our audience has been growing. We are trying to get to your request. We are asking you on the podcast if you will go to our resource page, if you will go to thedisappearingmind.com. There you will find resources, and you'll also find a place there on the webpage to be able to submit your questions. Many people who listen to the podcast will often tell me that there are things that they would like to know about, or maybe there's specific questions that you want me to talk about, have an expert on, or do a little research on. So if that's you, I encourage you to visit our podcast and also like us on Facebook, subscribe to our podcast, watch for us on YouTube and Instagram and all of our media platforms. We really appreciate that. We want to connect with you and we want to answer your questions about dementia, no matter where you are on the journey. So let's go ahead and get started today on the 4 stages of the dementia journey. Typically, when we use that term, especially for those of us who are in healthcare, we're really talking about someone who has dementia and has a diagnosis, is already on the journey. But today, we're going to talk about it a little bit different. And when the podcast was created, the marketing team came together with me, and we really took a long look at not only the prevalence of dementia and its growth throughout the nation and the world, but what that looked like. When we talk about this 4-stage process, we're talking about people who are interested for their future health, someone who's preclinical, who don't have a diagnosis, or maybe don't even have a family member who's ever had a diagnosis, but really are just concerned with their health in general and are starting to really look at the aspects of cognitive health or brain health. There are 4 stages I'm going to talk about today, dialogue about where people are and can be on this journey, or getting more information about dementia. I think the more information that we provide and we begin to talk about will be very helpful when or if you encounter dementia or have a friend or a colleague, as well as a family member who has dementia or possibly will be diagnosed with dementia. The 4 stages are really, in the first stage, way preclinical. There's no dementia noted, but people are curious. They're curious about this. It can be kind of scary. It can be a thought process. Even for myself, having worked in the healthcare field for a number of years with a specialty in dementia, it's something that I think about. I've talked to you before that my mother had dementia, but it really wasn't the type of dementia that's genetic or family related. Her dementia is directly due to a number of head injuries that she sustained later in her life. And because she did age, and over the age of 80, statistically, the Alzheimer's Association tells us and research tells us that your prevalence of developing dementia is greater. So there's a lot of premorbidity or preconditions that can also contribute to this. But for today, we're talking about what is prevention and how do we keep well? How do we begin to look at the future, and how will we garner preventative medicine to really help us in this process? just as we're talking about it, and as people are listening to the podcast and have an interest in understanding in and about dementia, what is cognitive health? We all want to stay healthy. We're used to talking about heart health, we're used to talking about physical health, but brain health is becoming more and more popular at this time and will continue to do so because we now know so many things that maybe we didn't know before. So let's talk about keeping well, prevention, and looking at that process. So lifestyle choices for brain health are going to be really important. So I think that we are seeing people really take a look at professionals, colleagues, and family members who maybe has been thought to be pretty healthy. And in the past, maybe they're physically fit, or maybe they have been an intellectual person in their career and has thought to be pretty smart, pretty wise, and really pretty active. So I think that people are really looking at brain health in a new way. They're looking at options for brain health. There's a lot of good material, good books that have been written in and around cognitive health and cognitive reserve. I have had a few guest on experts, from neurologists to neuropsych to psychologists, all of those expertise to really talk about, what does that mean? Is it being tested? I think that that's one of the things we want to look at. But what about eating healthy, or being healthy, or continuing to grow our gray matter and build that brain muscle, that cognitive muscle that we need to do? So we are seeing across the gamut lots of games, from brain games and teasers and that sort of thing, to actual conversations of people who really take a focus on keeping their mind sharp and active, and also to testing. We're seeing more testing. So there is a lot of science out there, and it's mixed, to be honest. I think that we're seeing research, we're talking about value based health in the United States, but there's a lot of science based steps to help to not only sharpen your memory, but to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's disease. There's a lot of studies that are coming out. The CMS is doing a project in and around looking at dementia, looking at some guidance of how to manage this journey. And so there's a lot of good materials coming out, but some of us are at risk. And generally, that is going to have to do with family genetics. Does dementia run in our family? Our parents, our grandparents, a close sibling is going to make us a little bit more prone. And there's a lot of testing out there in genes and other type of testing to see if we are prone to that kind of thing. But there are many other types of conditions that make us predisposed to Alzheimer's disease. And I'm not going to get into them all today, but I do want to say that I want to have some more experts on to really explore this whole side. But certainly diseases like arteriosclerotic heart disease, chronic hypertension, vascular and heart conditions that go untreated. Certainly those things, morbid obesity, extreme diabetes, these are conditions that could and are thought to contribute to cognitive issues and perhaps dementia. So we really want to know and understand way up front. We've talked about making cognitive health a part of our annual physical, being connected with our healthcare providers to really take a whole look at that side of our health as we're planning. And then there are many interventions to make sure that we are utilizing our brains, that we're exercising our brains. There are many sciences out there. There are many recommendations still to this day. Being active exercise, healthy eating, all of those things factor into cognitive health, but as well as having an active mind, staying active, socialization, all of those factors are what younger people are interested in. And more, we're seeing throughout the United States that this kind of health is becoming very popular. So we're really glad to see that. And here at the podcast, we're going to focus on that preclinical. We're going to focus a lot on that prevention. And of course, those other risk factors, including genetics. What does that mean? And if you find that you are genetically disposed to dementia, what can you do? So stay tuned for that. But there are many causes of dementia we've talked about. We've talked about the different types of dementia. But I think that understanding very early and making brain health, cognitive health a part of your lifestyle is going to go a long way in making us less vulnerable to this disease. We've talked about the early warning signs of dementia. The Alzheimer's Association, as well as this podcast, has posted lots of resources on early warning signs. And really, when we're talking about this first stage here, you want to be aware of any cognitive changes you're having, forgetfulness, misplacing things continuously, your ability to recall things. All of those things could be early factors and things that you want to look at and can focus on improving your memory. Mild cognitive impairment is something that we talked about and really is not dementia. It is a change in the abilities of brain function, cognitive abilities, but it doesn't really impact your daily life. Mild cognitive impairment is usually the first step if you get in early and are evaluated, meaning there's some changes going on. We don't know exactly what they are, but there's some changes going on. It bears monitoring, follow ups with a neurologist, coming back and seeing how you're doing, setting some baselines for evaluations, and then using those as a matrix going forward to gear where you are. And then early diagnosis. We're always talking about early diagnosis. And there's some very young people that are dealing with some cognitive issues. They're not really sure why. And the chances of them actually being dementia are thought to be slim. There can be a number of environmental factors, nutritional factors, other diseases, and even physical conditions that can contribute to your brain function or your brain health. A lot of people talk about brain fatigue or they talk about brain fog. And I think that we all know that our brain function can vary if we are overly stressed, if we're not well hydrated, if we have a electrolyte imbalance, and just if we're fatigued in general. So we do see that. Those are the kinds of things we want to pay attention to, that we want to take care of, just like we would take care of cardiac or heart issues if our blood pressure were fluctuating. So these are things that are really important preclinically, and I think overall for anyone who's concerned about their overall well-being and health. With that, there's a lot of studies being done in the United States. I alluded to the one by CMS, and they're looking at that path and journey. There is so many studies on unpaid caregivers and what that path looks like once a diagnosis would finally come. But it's really important that you take a look at that. You take a look at where you're at, what would happen if you got a diagnosis, what journey or what preparation have you made? And being a dementia coach and working with so many individuals and families who've developed dementia, that's really the hard part. At this pre-stage 1, becoming aware of not only your health, but planning for the future, planning for the what ifs. I think it's really important as part of our physical, as part of our cognitive health, to really think about what would we do, what would we want to do, what are our options. It's never a good idea to plan while you're there, but this whole prevention and preclinical, I think that as a nation, we are going to see the rise of more brain health experts, more preventative techniques, more technology that's going to support and build out our brain muscle. And so, really keep your eye out for those kinds of things, as well as personal things like healthy eating, avoiding obesity, staying active, staying social. I think it's really, really important for us in these stages. And then really, most people just want some basic information about how to do that. And so we're going to address this stage quite often on the podcast, because I think when we know more and we can share that information, it really helps us think about where we're going as individuals, and especially as we age. And for sure, folks, that happens to all of us, some of us quicker than others. So it really is something to think about. I did a 2-part series on living well with dementia. This stage here would be where you may not have a diagnosis, but you know something's different. You know something's happening. You know some things are going on with you. And so this could even still be preclinical or pre-diagnosis, living well. Really take a look at our life and our lifestyle. Do we have some of the risk factors for dementia? And are we thinking about it? I think that that's basically one of the things that are really important. Dementia is not easy to see until it's apparent or you're diagnosed. And so some of us don't even think about those factors as we move forward. I think now nationally, we're seeing an increase. When I say increase, I think it's more noticeable of alcohol induced or even drug induced types of dementia from years and years of abusing our bodies. And most people don't think about that. They don't think of that as being a result of not being healthy, of setting parameters on our food and alcohol consumption. So living well really is where we need to take a look at what habits do we have? What habits have we had in our past that may contribute to dementia in the future? Living your best life, making those changes, I think, as we age, and just being cognizant of what our options might be. We really need to take ownership of our health now, so that in the future, perhaps we're not so prone. I'm hoping to have a diabetes expert on that talks about the significance, the impact that uncontrolled diabetes can have on the brain, and some of the research in and around dementia and the prevalence within having uncontrollable blood sugars or have that go on chronically for a number of years. So there's some interesting statistics out there, some interesting information, but just think about that. If you are a diabetic, how important it is to maintain and control your blood sugar, to control your weight, control inflammation. We know that there's a lot of research in and around inflammation and inflammation of the brain, and what kinds of not only diseases, but chronic conditions that contribute to inflammation in the brain. And we're learning more and more about how that impacts us in our health, both now and in the future. And then tips to living our best life. So when we talk about living our best life, it is not only taking hold of the opportunities that we have to maintain and improve our brain health, but looking at other options and how they suit us. We do know, I've talked to many people, I've talked to many families, many researchers about this. We do know that Alzheimer's disease and other dementias are present for many, many years before we actually see the symptoms of them. So that can be from the familiar type or the gene enhanced to other conditions that maybe happen and later contribute to dementia as you age and your brain has sustained some deficits or damage earlier in your life, can really contribute later in your life to the prevalence of having cognitive issues or even dementia. We want to maintain our independence. We want to live well now. And we want to learn more about this type of health, brain health, so that we can be better prepared as we learn more. I have every hope that a cure will come. I just believe that. I have every hope that we will be able to put some prevention in place, that we will be able to be better diagnosed and therefore better treated. So there are a lot of new and exciting things that are coming forth. They're not quick, but we are seeing some forward paced movement in the field of cognitive health. In this second stage here of living well, preclinical early stages, coping is one of the things that we like to talk about. And I think it's really important coping, whether it's coping with the stress you're under or duress you're under, or you've actually received a diagnosis and now you're trying to navigate that process. And what does that look like? How are you going to do that? I think that anyone, whether you have been diagnosed with some cognitive issues, and they're not saying what it is, they're not even saying it's mild cognitive impairment or certainly anything else, it's stressful. It's very stressful. And I think that there is a thought process when that happens that it's a demise, that things are going to progress quickly. And in most cases, that is absolutely not true. So it's really important from the get go that if you are in that boat, what are you going to do differently? Whether it is get a life coach or dementia coach, or whether you're going to look at the options that might be beneficial to you, coping is going to be something that is really, really important. And coping can come in a lot of different fashions, whether you're a person of faith, whether you're a person who uses meditation or counseling, whether you're a person who really just delves into their health and focuses on that by increasing the amount of exercise, the amount of brain activity you do, and really focusing on your diet. These things are important. I just said on a recent panel and a psychologist with a pharmacist. And in that discussion, we were really talking about a couple of things. And one of the things that is so important was depression, and really treating depression, recognizing what that can do to the body and the brain, and really making sure that depression is treated. Because we do know that dementia, some of the numbers that are being quoted through research is that 40% of individuals who have dementia will suffer from some sort of depression. Really, how important is it to make sure that you're treating your depression, that you do not let it become chronic, that you do not overlook the fact that treating depression can really help your cognitive health, your outcome, your outlook, as well as your motivation. I plan on having those individuals on the podcast to talk about that whole side of things, because I think it's really, really important to be aware of that and not just let it go. Depression can be a terrible thing for people. And there are things and support, both pharmacological and non pharmacological treatments that are available to really help support individuals who are going through that. And so be aware of that. Be cognizant of that and talk to your physician about it. See what's available. Don't just let it go. Again, deeper research and education is available now. There are so many new books and new research being done. There are studies going on across the United States to really take a look at the path and the journey of dementia, how to treat it, how to help people stay well and live well with early stages of the disease, as well as all the way through the entire process. But I think up front, it almost seems like some people just assume that they have the diagnosis and now they're just going to wait for the confusion to come instead of really taking charge of their health, taking charge of their life, and living well every day. So These things are really important, and we encourage you to do that. We plan on having individuals on who have not only done that, but have been very successful at living well, even with a dementia diagnosis. And they're inspiring individuals who live well all the way through. And it's going to be interesting when we take a look at this. And I plan on interviewing several people, but how they varied or how their course with dementia is very different from other individuals because they have taken a stand and taken control of their brain health and controlling the factors that contribute to brain health in their individual lives. It's really a personal choice and I think beneficial with any disease, but especially with dementia. Identifying support options and services. So, people who are really in this stage here, it's not necessary to change your entire life. What you will need to look at is what modifications do I need to take? Or do I need to slow down in certain areas? Do I need to make certain changes in my life to be able to cope with this process we have? Getting that thought or that diagnosis or just worrying about your cognitive health or what's happening really isn't enough. I think that we have to be sure there are not some circumstances or conditions that are contributing to how we're feeling or the changes in our ability to recall, our abstract thinking, our executive function, our judgment, all of those things could be caused by a number of factors. And we've talked about those, but they're more common than we know. We're learning more about this as we continue to do research and as we continue to have more experts come out on brain health and cognitive reserve, talk about living well, staying brain healthy, accessing some of this information. Options and services are really, really important. And then really being educated. I think that many people, the word dementia is scary. It's very scary. And I think many people don't really understand what that is and how it impacts you. And I've had many individuals tell me that they don't really want to talk about it with their friends because it feels like they're doomed. It feels like a death sentence. And so people don't truly understand brain health and they can assume or presume that it is more than it is. Typically, the courses of each of the dementias is going to be different. And there are people that live 20 years or more with dementia because it can move so slowly. And then there are other types of dementia we've talked about here on the podcast that move a little bit quicker. The stages are quicker and shorter. We'll do a separate session on that, what you can expect, how to identify what stage you're in. All of those kind of factors are really important. And we want you to know and understand that even if you think that this is happening, there are things you can do. There are actionable steps that you can take. And so really, really important. The third kind of stage in this journey here is living well with increased help and support. So this is going to be into the early stages, going into the middle stages, maybe even going middle to late stages. We've talked about this before. Living well, what are the safety tips? What kinds of things do you have to put into place to support you? It may start with sticky notes and reminders, devices, cueing, and that kind of support, nutrition, but then it will go a little bit further. Maybe we need to look at what are some of the safety features or what kinds of things maybe you don't want to take the risk with anymore. Maybe you're not as active at work, or maybe driving, maybe your response time is not what it could and should be. Again, there are tests out there to actually do a driving evaluation to really test your safety, your response time. These are things that as an individual with your physician and with your family, you need to think about and talk about. Again, dementia can be a long process, certainly, and you don't want to just give up or stop navigating your life, but you might need to modify some of the things you do. And maybe you need more rest periods or you need to put some boundaries in place. You may have good days or other days where you might be a little bit more fatigued. You may find that after a certain hour of the day, you don't have the energy level. But these things you can identify and adapt your life in and around that. Again, we've talked a lot about planning for now and in the future. Living well is really important. It's not a new concept, but it's a personal one. And I know a lot of people who have been able to do this. Some have not been able to fulfill the plan that they made. They may have to add more support structure than others, but certainly there's lots and lots of options out there. Choosing your healthcare team, what are the options? Are you a candidate for medication for some of these new drugs? Are you a candidate for research? Are you willing to become part of the research that's being done to improve the treatment of dementia for future generations and maybe for you? There's a lot of new drugs that are coming out and treatments. We're closer and closer. There's more being done every day, every year. I think that taking advantage of that is really important. Having a great healthcare team. I'll go back to the recent panel that I was on. It is imperative that we know that from pharmacological to non-pharmacological treatments are being improved. They're being invented. They're being researched on a daily, monthly, and yearly basis to improve our choice and options that we have. No longer are the days that we have one method of treatment or we assume that the course of this disease is going to be the same for everyone. It simply isn't. There's a lot of premorbid factors to be looked at. So I am encouraged that we as a nation are going to be able to get a handle, offer better health care, offer more preventative issues. Studies are being done on value-based care. There's investment in looking to the future and prevention of this condition and disease. And so it's exciting for me, who really is coming through this profession and have been for a long time, to see some of these wonderful things that are coming forward. There's another link, and I want to get some of the experts, some of the vendors, and some of the medical studies that are out that are linking urinary tract infections to increase confusion. We know that. We've known that for years. However, more and more studies are coming on the chronic urinary tract infection and how it impacts our cognitive outcomes and our cognitive ability. So that's very exciting because there are conditions that maybe are chronic in our life that we will be able to treat and address that will give us better quality of life. On the panel, we began to talk about that and these outcomes. And at a recent convention that I did attend, there are a lot of companies that are invested in this, and they're beginning to track these trends in individuals. They're able to get some baselines to really be able to study how out of control diabetes or pneumonia, respiratory infections, how urinary tract infections, how common are they? How chronic are they? And what are the outcomes? Can we tie this together in their treatment to cognitive health and cognitive symptoms? So these things are really, really important. We have looked at and talked about some of the behavioral things that happen. And when I say behavioral, I mean changes in behavioral expression, things that are different maybe than they used to be. Some personality change, maybe some resistance or more frustration or even anger, those kinds of things, and why they're common in certain types of dementia. What does that look like? So we now see such a prevalence and such a increase in the availability of behavioral health, focusing on dementia and supporting individuals with coping mechanisms, with different types of outcome therapies that really kind of support that whole cognitive side of health and treating our body. So this is very exciting. I want to delve into that and talk about with a psychologist, with a psychiatrist, how do you support someone in this? And what are the benefits of being part of behavioral health therapy, especially in the earlier stages when you're trying to cope with so many things? When people get dementia, it's harder for them to process many things in their life, as well as things that we take for granted. It has added stress factors on us as individuals. So we are more likely to have more behavioral expressions, to get frustrated. Processing, trying to navigate where you are every minute of the day can be very overwhelming. Delving into that, what kinds of behavioral modification therapies are available? How can you be supported by a life coach or behavioral coach who might be able to assist you really in mastering where you are cognitively and supporting that by putting some measures in place for your life early so that you have better outcomes. These are all new and kind of exciting and evolving types of things that we're seeing available to us much more early on in the dementia process. And it's very, very exciting to talk about. And then let's really talk about too, once we're well into the diagnosis, really that last stage of the journey. Really, it's part of the process, not only living well, but dying well. And when I say that, I mean with dignity, with quality care, with choice, having the individual be represented and what they valued, what was important to them preserved. That is not only important, but it's a privilege for those of us in healthcare to maintain the dignity and the values, the morals of an individual that we care for when they can no longer navigate that space. And those are the things that we talk about end of life and what that looks like. One of the things I've talked about before is really the support mechanisms, memory care communities, how important that they can be, and really taking that pressure off of the family, off of the spouse, and adding that 24/7 staff that are specially trained in dementia, all types of dementia, ongoing training, but also in behavioral health and redirection and providing that social and therapeutic activity portion, as well as nutrition, meals, all of those factors that really allow the caregiver, especially if it's a spouse or a child, to go back into that role of being a spouse and go back into that role of being a sibling or a child and having that support with people who deal with dementia every day. It is really important. I think it is such a support for families because the journey is not new to those individuals. We train on it every day. We follow guidelines and regulations. We understand pharmacological and non-pharmacological approaches, and we stay up on some of the latest treatments. I think that that's important, but also what I'm seeing trending, and it varies across the United States depending on how large of a metropolitan area that you live in. Do you live in a rural area? But the evolution of hospice in supporting this disease, it is chronic, it is ongoing. Usually there are other health factors involved around this diagnosis that would support a hospice team supporting the individual, not a death kind of way, but really prevention, maintaining health. Chronic health is important. And what I'm seeing is a real evolution of hospice in supporting individuals who have chronic disease along with dementia and supporting those other health factors that actually helps in supporting their dementia. So we're seeing this trend because more and more people are being diagnosed throughout the United States and around the world. We're really seeing this whole side of hospice. I think we typically think of hospice just in the death process and not in the preventative or the support process. And more, I think in especially larger areas, they are extremely beneficial to the family and useful. especially in the area of medication management, navigating that path of titration of medication up or down, managing and mitigating the treatment of these other diseases, which do change as dementia progresses. It generally is going to become the primary diagnosis. Having that expertise that provides that palliative care, that palliative expertise is really, really important. So not only do we see that in the home setting, which can be invaluable, we see it in the assisted living or the memory care setting where hospice actually partners with providers to support the whole healthcare process, the whole dementia journey under the care of a physician, but really with having individuals who are expertly trained in the death and dying process, but really the journey that it takes to get there. And we do know that Alzheimer's disease is the long goodbye, and many dementias go for years. So it is a journey and a path. It is an incurable disease once it's diagnosed, you know that. And so having that kind of support is really important to consider. And I just want you to know that there's a lot of supportive care that can be provided through a hospice kind of situation as you go along, just having that extra set of eyes and expertise to guide you. So I hope that talking about some of these journeys was helpful to you today. I really appreciate your comments. Please visit us on all our media sites. Go to the disappearingmind.com. Leave us your comments, leave us your questions. We're really proud of the podcast and where it's going. We hope that you will subscribe. I hope that you will share the podcast with people you know. Keep it for the future. Visit us on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. Until next time, this is Dawn Platt. Make it a memorable day.
Thank you for joining us for the Disappearing Mind podcast. We hope it's helped you find clarity and support along your journey. Be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode, visit our website to suggest future topics, and share the podcast with friends and family.